Titleist is the number one ball in golf. Yes, being number one is a number, and more players trust the Pro V1 or Pro V1X than all other golf balls combined. But being number one is more than a number. It's a mindset. It's a relentless mission to design and manufacture the best performing golf balls in the game, so you can chase whatever your number one is. Titleist, the number one ball in golf.
Hello and welcome to episode 119 of The Thing About Golf, the podcast series from Golf Australia magazine seeking to explain just what it is that gets and keeps so many of us hooked on this amazing game. Rod Murray's my name, but it's my colleague John Huggan who we're interested in today because he recently sat down with a golfer whose name will be familiar to many, but whose backstory is likely less so. John Huggan, the name Howard Clark is one of those that I recognise but I know little about, which it turns out is a real shame because he has a fascinating backstory. This was a terrific chat. How and how long ago did you come to know Howard Clark?
Well, covering the European tour from sort of mid-90s, full-time. I've known him really since then and a little bit before that. Howard, I always was kind of drawn to Howard because, I'm drawn to guys who hit the ball well. I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to ball striking, and which I hold my hands up to. But then Howard was one of the best. He was unfortunate. Just like we talked about Mark James in the last podcast, Howard was in that group of guys who were kind of half a step down from the superstars, the Faldos, the Lyles, the Wisdoms, the Langers, the Sevis, and didn't really get the recognition back then that they deserved. But if Howard Clark was playing at his top of his game today, he would be comfortably in the top 50 in the world. He'd be playing full time in America. He'd play wherever he wanted. He'd be like Paul Casey, Justin Rose, Luke Donald. They got the benefits of the brave new world, if you like. But Howard and Mark James and Sam Torrance, Ken Brown, that kind of group, they never really got to play in majors in America. Hardly ever is the honest truth.
And you bring that up, as you said, with Mark James last week and again with Howard Clark here. And it's such an interesting thing to consider how different all of those results might look had we had the systems in place in the 70s and 80s that we do today. You're absolutely right. It's because if you look at some of the Americans who won majors, you mentioned a few, Bob Tway and those kind of ilk of players, all fine players, but not better players than Mark James and Howard Clark.
No, not at all. I mean, and I've written this a couple of times now. I think that if you go back and look at the list of major winners, especially the three in America, you've got to take it with a pinch of salt until fairly recently, because a lot of the best players, you go far back, Neil Coles is always known, Peter Allis, guys like that who are terrific players, but never got to play in America. So, they had one chance a year to win a major. So the list of major winners is heavily weighted towards the Americans until, as I say, fairly recently.
He had a really interesting Ryder Cup career in particular, Howard.
Yeah, I mean, he played on a regular basis and did pretty well, I think, given that he was one of the few now, I think, I'm thinking out loud now. Was he one that played for GB&I?
I was going to say he crossed over. He played in the last GB&I, the only team, and then he played in a couple of European teams. I thought his take on that transition was really interesting.
Yeah, there's not many people can say that now when you think about it. And but again, I feel sorry for Howard in the sense that getting back to just how good he was, he would have done well in America had he been there full time. I mean, he just hit the ball so well. That he would have stood out at any level eventually if he'd given him the chance.
Almost as interesting, Huggy, was his revelation towards the end that he doesn't really engage with the game much anymore. Such a big part of his life for so long. I found that intriguing.
Yeah, well, he was on the on-course guy for Sky for a long time. It's been a few years now since that ended, and I think he is a little bit detached from the game. I don't think he plays, really at all. And he lives in a lovely house in the Yorkshire countryside and walks the dog every day and watches the golf on the telly, and I think that's just about it. Which is good luck to him. I mean, he seemed perfectly happy. He's got a lovely wife, nice home, as I say. And but you're right, he's not actually he's maybe kind of a wasted resource. I think we'd let these guys go maybe too early. They've got a lot to offer, and he'd be one.
Well, as I said, Howard Clark won't be the best known name that we've had on this episode, but like Mark James last week, I think he'll be a real revelation for people. Thank you for bringing it to us, Huggy. Terrific interview.
My pleasure. Okay, welcome to the latest edition of the Thing About Golf podcast. I'm joined today by a man I used to love watch hit golf balls back in the day. Former PGA champion, former Ryder Cup player, Howard Clark. What was and is the thing about golf for you?
Marvellous, lovely. I love the introduction. I love that PGA champion. The thing about golf, John, it's been, for me, a way of life for 50 years, counting down from 60 years, I suppose. My mum died when I was 10 in 1964, and it's an anniversary of her death this year. And really from that moment in time, which was the big turning point for me, because I didn't really know my dad at the time. When my mum died, my dad came to pick me up, take me under his wing and, lead me forward from 10 years of age. And he introduced me to golf. And by the time I was 11, I was practicing as much as I could possibly do. And up until a few years ago, I practiced every day and enjoyed it.
Was he a good player, your dad?
Yeah, he was a scratch golfer for 19 years of his time. He was a policeman at the time, so he got a lot of spare time, but he didn't have enough time to go into the professional ranks. He thought that he wasn't good enough at the time, but really the strict regime that they had in those days to get a scratch handicap, he probably was good enough. But I know that he watched a lot of golf, and he knew by watching golfers that he wasn't good enough. He played with Peter Thompson in the Open at Troon, for instance, and he realised then that there was a lot of psyche in it. He was playing well, and I remember one little story he said that when we got to the turn, my dad went out in 32 or 33 at Troon, which was the usual type of thing. Yeah. And Thompson said to him on the long walk between the 9th green and the 10th tee, he says, tell me, Keith, is it your birthday today? It seems you're getting a lot of breaks and you're doing very well. And that was the last he saw of him.
That sounds like Peter Thompson right enough, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, and he had the white shoes as well, twitching on his backswing and the rest of it. Yeah, it was all those little things. But very memorable. And because he'd played at such a high level, he knew what it took to get somebody to go forward in the game and push me in the right ways.
And what was it for you then? I mean, there's always a switch goes off or a button gets pushed. There's a moment where you think, this is it for me.
I think the biggest moment was when I went to watch the Amateur Championship at Formby. Bob Dixon played against, I believe it was, now the name will come to me eventually. Bob Dixon played against a very famous amateur player in those days, and we enjoyed it. We went out for the day, we walked the 36 holes that it was, and we watched these two players play, and it was just amazing. And they were the top amateurs at the time. I'm struggling to think of the player that he played in the final. No, it wasn't. It was another American player, I'm pretty sure. It'll come to me eventually, probably about 2 days' time. Yeah. But then he took me along to watch a professional tournament at Panel Golf Club just up the road from here in Harrogate. And I remember standing by the first tee, and John Jacobs was standing by the first tee, and he was teaching a guy called Martin Roosink at the time, a Dutch player, mountainous type of character of a man, and he was playing on the first tee, and he asked John Jacobs where he should hit this ball, and John said, aim it at the gardener's shed on the right-hand side, and he said, kind of turn it over from right to left, and he says, you'll be somewhere near. And he hit this ball over, and it was the small ball, of course, in those days. I think about 1967 or 68 or something like that. And he started this ball, and it faded instead of drawing. It finished up on another hole that was running by the side, and Jacobs and he had a laugh, and they wandered off. And I walked around. We watched Bernard Hunt. We watched Peter Townsend, Mike Ingham, who was the pro at Moralton at the time. And I think that was really the time when I thought, okay, yeah, the amateurs are good, but these boys are different again. You know, these boys could really play. Even though Mike Ingham kind of hit his ball at the 18th, he kind of hit almost a half top with his driver, pitched on the end of the tee and finished up just short of the green because it was almost a drivable par 4, be easily drivable nowadays. But that was just about the time, mid to late 60s. I hadn't been playing long. I hadn't known my dad that long, but within 3 years, I was hooked.
When did it become clear that you were good then? Did you realise that you were better than most?
I don't think I ever had that thought early on. I thought I could play, but there were always players that were so much better than me. I played in the boys' championship at Dunbar in 68, was it?
I remember watching you. 69 it was.
69 was it?
Martin Foster won it.
Martin Foster won it, fellow Yorkshireman, and we played a lot for Yorkshire in the foursomes together. And talk about gamesmanship, Martin was the perfect scenario. He was bad cop and I was good cop in those days. And you know, he'd go up to the opposition after 9 holes, and we would be down. Usually, if he was chatting to them, and he'd say, "Surely," he says, "you've had your best luck now." He says, "You might as well walk in from here," and you know, and he'd plant some seed into their heads. Yeah. Martin was brilliant. But that time, I had a trial for the England boys team, and I played with Ewan Murray, and we both shot under par. Neither of us got a second trial. Ewan got so upset with it that he decided...
What was Ewan Murray doing trialling for England by then?
So, well, he was playing for Scotland.
Right,
he was obviously trialling for Scotland and trialling for the international team.
Okay, right.
There was several things, but we all had these games. I think I shot 69 or 68 or something, and he shot 71, and neither of us got a second trial. And he decided then, that's it, I've had enough with golf. You cannot pick golfers on choice, on hearsay, on looks, pretty swings. He said you have to judge them on scores, which is the right way. And he decided to turn pro and go and be an assistant with his dad at Baberton, I believe. Yeah. And I was upset naturally. I think I got beat by Barclay Howard in that match.
Sounds about right.
In that match play event. 1969.
It's funny, actually, and I think I've mentioned this before on this podcast, is that when I talk to people like you, Padraig Harrington always comes to mind because he's still pissed off that he didn't get in the Eisenhower Trophy team in 1994 or whatever it was. Yeah. And you've pretty similar. Everybody got a story about a team they didn't get picked for in amateur golf.
And it was that amateur annoyance that either killed people off or it drove people forward. You know, Peter Hedges was the perfect amateur golfer. He played in everything amateur, didn't have any aspirations of turning pro, didn't want to know. Roger Revell was a superb amateur player. I played in the England team at Lytham alongside him. I played in boys and international teams alongside him. He was a terrific player, but his face didn't fit. He just didn't fit in, and he was a little bit of rebel, in him. But what a player! And he would have qualified in for the tour at any time. Didn't have that little push. I managed to get into other teams. I think I played at Southampton and Ainsdale a little bit later on, and managed to get into the teams in 1971. And, of course, I won the boys in 1971 at Barassi. And it was those teams that really meant so much. I've got pictures. My dad put pictures into a frame for me many years ago. And, you know, those were the things you wanted. And, of course, in those days, it was so important to get international status in either England, Ireland, Scotland or Wales, or GB&I, or Europe. I think there was a European team that played the Eisenhower, as Padraig was obviously missing out on. If you got international status, you didn't have to wait 5 years to be able to turn pro and earn money.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, when I turned pro in 73, there was a rule that if you were an international player, you only had to wait 6 months from turning professional to be able to earn money.
Right.
But if you didn't get international status, then the run-of-the-mill amateur player wouldn't be able to turn pro and go and earn money on the tour.
Because you played in the Walker Cup that year.
Well, exactly. Yeah. That enhanced my, it should have given me sponsors, but it didn't. But it helped me get into the professional ranks. I didn't have to wait 5 years to earn money, which was a big thing.
Everybody tells me now, guys that have played pro golf like you have, they talk about the Walker Cup as a nice thing to have done on the way up, but nobody cares about it, not even a little bit, once you turn pro.
It's a shame, isn't it? Yeah, it really is. I think the Americans see it. I think it's bigger for the Americans more than it is for us. GB and I could never match the United States in any way, shape, or form.
That you played in '73 and they won in '71.
They did at St Andrews, absolutely, yeah. And the players on those teams, if you look back, they were pretty successful players. My first Walker Cup I played, well, my only Walker Cup, I had to go down to Heathrow and stay overnight for some reason, no idea why, to catch a Pan Am flight. After joining up with the team, and I roomed with John Davis,
right,
from Sunningdale. And if there was a chalk and cheese pairing, it was John Davis and myself.
I can imagine. Yeah.
We got into the room. I had a holdall and my golf bag, and he had his golf bag in a big carrier, and also a trunk. The one that would go onto ocean liners, a proper trunk, absolutely square at the sides, square at the corners, brass handles, you name it, had brass this and leather that.
He came from a slightly different world than you did.
Slightly different. And he opened his case when he got into the room. I remember him coming into the room and he opened his case and he wanted to find his pajamas. Well, I'd never heard of pajamas. And he opened up this trunk and every item of clothing was layered with tissue paper. And he says,
has this been done by the butler?
This confounded butler, he says, I've told him not to embarrass me by putting all this tissue paper in. Yeah. It was so funny. He tried to be annoyed at it, but he was obviously used to it and so on. But I thought that was the biggest stepping stone of all. And it showed, when he turned up to a tournament at Lytham or Birkdale, an amateur event, he turned up in a Jensen Interceptor. It wasn't real life. It wasn't life as I knew it. It was catching lifts and getting a bus here and there to try and get to tournaments or getting my dad to give me a ride there. And after working through the winter to try and get some money to pay for these amateur events. I worked in the wholesale fruit market in Leeds. I worked in the electoral registration office. Also in Leeds, in winters to just get some money together to try and pay some expenses towards my dad's outgoings because there were no ingoings. Yeah.
What's your memories of the Walker Cup?
I was a member at
Was it Brookline you played?
Yes, I did. I played at Brookline. And the memories I have there is that we stayed in Boston. I remember getting a phone call in the middle of the night, and it was a strange phone call. It was a bit like spam is today, or being hacked today. Somebody had called in from outside to try and put the team members off. Yeah. There were sirens in the background on the telephone, and anyway, managed to hang up and block calls and all the rest of it. Stayed in a fabulous hotel. Can't remember what the name was. I'd never heard of Cheers at that time. Right. I don't know whether Cheers existed. Yeah. Probably did, early 70s. So we played at Brayburn over at some part of the county, which was an amateur venue. We played at Kitanset. I think that's the right way to pronounce it.
Now, at this point, you're obviously thinking you're good enough to turn pro because you did.
Well,
and clearly you were.
Yeah,
as it turned out. But
what
were you thinking at that point?
I was kind of thinking I might be, but then I played against the players. I played against Marty West in the Walker Cup after playing in the foursomes with John Davis. Hence the reason why we roomed together, to try and get us to talk to each other. I remember we were 5 down after. And we were standing on the 11th, and he hooked a shot over the trees on the left at the 11th. I hit the trees, trying to get over the trees back onto the green. He then hit this shot. And remember, we're 5 down. And he pitched this ball on the green and it ran down the slope and into the hole for a 4, which was absolutely crucial and criminal, really. We won the hole. We ended up finishing all square and being upset that we actually could have won the game. We got a half a point, but 5 down on the 11th, blah, blah, blah. So I played in the singles, and we played a couple of singles matches in those days. I played against Marty West the first time, and I remember standing on the first tee. Rodney Foster was alongside me as my guide for that moment. And he said to me, he says, "How are you feeling?" I said, I'm pretty shaky. I said, "I'm pretty nervous." He says, "Just look across the tee." He says, "Look at him." He says, "He might look calm." He says, "But he's shaking more than you are." He says, "Because if he loses, he's embarrassed." And he says, blah, blah. He told me all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And he says, "All you have to do," he says, "is hit the first fairway." He says, "That's all it is. You hit the first fairway, he will crumble." And anyway, this was his amateuristic view. Anyway, I hit the first fairway. I hit a pretty good tee shot, as it turned out, down the fairway. And Marty West hooked out of bounds or sliced out of bounds, whatever. He hooked, hit the ball out of bounds. He says, "What did I tell you?" He says, you've got him. Anyway, I ended up winning the game 2-1. It wasn't exactly a walk in the park.
Yeah.
I then played against Vinnie Giles in another singles match, a manager, a good amateur player.
Well, he's just done this podcast a few months ago. And I was a big fan of Vinnie Giles. Yeah. Terrific match player, as you probably discovered that.
He beat me 1-up.
Yeah.
He beat me at the last. There were all sorts of things could have happened and didn't. Mm-hmm. And he went on to manage several players in the game with a very, was he a lawyer or something?
He was, He managed Tom Kite, Gary Koch, guys like that, Lanny Watkins.
Like terrific character. And so those were my 2 singles. So I won one and lost one, halved the foursomes. And it was about the same as my Ryder Cup record, as it turned out. But I didn't realise that at the time.
I've got your Ryder Cup record here, by the way.
7-7-1. Yeah, 7-7-1 is it?
50% dead.
Yeah, right on. And I think I was the same in the Walker Cup. Can't remember playing any foursomes or 4-balls. But it was a fabulous experience. There was all sort of antics going on at night times, with players, getting a glass of hot water and saying, "I can drink this before you," all that type of thing, carrying them down the hallway. And there was lots of things going on. So it was quite a good team, a great camaraderie between the players and the teams, because they're all from all over the place, Irish, Scottish, Welsh and English. So it was great to get on with all these players. And I just knew I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the travelling. It's the first time I ever went on an aeroplane was Leeds to London, and then on to the the Pan Am thing. So
what age were you at that point?
73, so I was 19, coming up to, I was 18, going on to 19.
Right.
So first time on planes, and I was very raw, very, very green, and trying to learn as much as I could. Several players on the team that were legends in my mind in amateur game, but I then went from amateur golf, and you're saying, could I turn pro? I turned pro pretty much after it, because that was about the right time, September time, to turn pro. September, October, November, and then you've got through to December, January, February. The tour always started in April, so I had 6 months. I think I turned pro officially in October, but set it all going in September. Pip Elson rang me. He knew a gentleman from the Midlands, a guy called John Camkin, who ran a couple of travel agencies, Thompson's Air Tours or Sky Tours, something like that. Lon Polly was his main business. He was also the professional footballers' chairman, managers' chairman. Mm-hmm. And John was a typical bachelor. He had business all the way through his mind. Fabulous guy that you could learn from. And John wanted to sponsor 2 or 3 golfers. Just wanted to see how it went. And Pip Elson rang me and said, "This guy wants to sponsor you. Will you come down and speak to him?" Fine. So he set me up a deal for the first 2 years of my life. I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together at that time. I'd been thrown out of home. My dad decided because I was going to get married, he didn't want to know me, and so.
Do you want to talk about your dad a bit more? I mean, I'm intrigued by what you've said already. You know.
Yeah, my dad was pretty much. I mean, I was at home with my mum until I was 10, and I got up to all sorts of things. I was getting into the wrong circles, you know, going.
I take it your parents were divorced, I take it.
Yes, they were. They separated very early. I never knew my dad until I ended up getting caught trying to steal something at Woolworths.
Right.
Fortunately, I didn't steal it because they caught me before I could walk out of the shop.
Right.
So I got up, you know, in front of the school, and that was when I first saw my dad and really recognised that he was my dad. And from there, he took a little bit more interest because he said he didn't want me turning into a juvenile delinquent. Mm-hmm. But my mum got a serious problem with her heart valve, and she died in 1964. September, I think it was 64. Actually, September the 24th, 1964. I do remember it, yeah. And it's etched. And the way that things happened after then, I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. There was certain things that I wasn't allowed to do, you know, and he put me into a different line of life altogether, and this is where golf became my life because I ended up caddying for him at weekends. He was playing in county matches and Leeds and district matches. He was in the teams for the local amateur events, and that helped a lot because one day I was caddying for him at Cobble Hall, and I picked up a golf club out of his bag. It was a 2-iron, Ben Huggan 2-iron with a white grip. I took a ball out of the bag and just had a swing. I was hopeless at school with written work, with listening, taking in, and absorbing things to write down, to remember things to write down. But put me in a situation where I could watch and learn, I was different again. I took it all in mentally, physically, visually, and I could see and feel what people were doing in front of me. And to copy something, to emulate something in my way was quite easy. So I picked up a golf club, took a golf ball out and whacked it. And I whacked the ball about 80 or 90 yards over my dad's head, over his opponent's head for that evening. Yeah. And the guy turned around to my dad. He says, "You better get him some lessons, Keith." And, of course, he got me some lessons with the local pro, a guy called Bert Myers, whose son was a pro as well. A young pro on the tour. Trying to get on tour, but he wasn't quite good enough.
Do you think your dad twigged right away that you had some talent?
Well, maybe. I
mean, he's a good player. He would see it right pretty quickly.
I think you can tell whether somebody can hold a golf club properly. And Bert told me all the basics, which was easy because it was easy to look at, easy to feel, to judge. And I'm talking about 10 and a half to 11 and a half years of age. By the time I was 12, I'd won competitions at Cobble Hall. So that was off handicap, of course. And that was the starting point. But when I started to get serious and started to play, he'd drop me off in Leeds at the Leeds bus station. I'd carry my golf clubs with me and carry them all the way up Elmeet Lane and go and play and practice all day at Cobble Hall, Leeds Golf Club, until he came and picked me up after work, and he'd go and have a drink and watch me hit a few balls. How's it been going? Yeah, the stacking's quite good, and getting the golf balls to pitch and finish in the same place was one of the things that Bert Myers told me. He says, if you can get accuracy with distance from certain clubs, he says, then you're striking the ball the same all the time.
I remember Nick Price telling me, the yardage will make you smile given how far they hit it these days. Nick Price told me you can tell a real golfer, he says, when they can hit a 7-iron 150 yards time after time after time after time.
That's right. You know? And this is obviously part of what Bert Myers used to tell me. If you can, and we played on those furrowed fairways where the farmers used to furrow the fairways, furrow the land so that they get more from the crops. And so these furrowed fairways, you couldn't get an even bounce. So there was always a few balls that bounced and trickled off into other areas. But it was the consistency that really helped me with my swing. And my dad didn't want to play. He didn't want to teach me. He wanted others to teach because he said he didn't want his short fuse to take over and upset me in any way.
Right.
So he wanted professionals to do it. And Bert was the perfect example.
Yeah. Plus, if you're like just about every other teenager in the history of the world, you're more likely to listen to somebody else than your dad.
Without a doubt, yeah. I've got two boys of my own and a girl, and yeah exactly. It's one-way traffic.
Yeah. Now, my memory of you, I mean, I watched you for a good long time on tour, is hitting the ball never looked like too much of an issue for you. I mean, that was always the strength of your game, and that was what made me want to watch you, was the ball striking.
Yeah, I think it must have come from that time, from those times at Cobble Hall, standing on outside the clubhouse. I remember I used to want people to be able to see me. I wanted to be able for the members to say, "Oh, you were hitting the ball quite well there," and used to like the feedback. Mm-hmm. I must have done that because I stood near the windows at times and hit balls away from the window, or the bay window near the men's bar. It was the same bar I used to go and watch them playing poker and try and learn how to play poker. Thank goodness I never understood it and never got to understand it. Yeah. But they used to play the slot machines and the fruit machine, I should say, and play snooker and play poker in there. But some of them used to have a cup of coffee and watch me hit balls outside. And always I'd get some feedback from them. And I used to kind of practice and then play a few holes and then come back and practice again. And it was my life. I mean, full stop. And I knew that I left school when I was 14. And that was a big step to take because there was only a kind of a job in the market, being a porter or something like that, or some remedial job, if that's the right word, some low paid.
It didn't sound like you had it easy. Nothing came easy for you.
Well, it wasn't really. I mean, the things, I mean, I didn't have the toughest of life. I wasn't beaten with a stick if I didn't make 69 or 70 that day. But I remember ringing up and, saying that I'd shot 77 with an 8 or a 9 at the first and getting a telling off and not wanting to go home. But those were the kind of the punishments in a way. Thank goodness there wasn't social media about in those days. That wouldn't have gone down well, I don't think. I'm not a great fan of social media. The difficulty was that the next day is always the most important, and that was the thing. The practice that I tried to get my kids to play and practice. But they didn't want to practice. So if you don't put into the game, you don't really get very much out. Yeah. And that was the thing that I was always insistent upon. And I was giving myself as much possible chance as I could to play and play well. And I knew that if I could practice hard, the results would come on the golf course. Didn't always come. When I turned pro, go back to
if it was that easy, how would everybody would work?
Absolutely. I went to under the Mr. Camkin under his sponsorship. The sponsorship deal with Camkin at the time was he paid for everything, but I paid him every penny that I earned.
Wow,
it was 100%. But he paid for my home life as well. Right. When you think that my rent and rates were £7.50 a week. Each. So £15 a week it was. He paid those bills as well.
Yeah. Well, I've got here that your first win as a pro, you won £1,000 winning the tournament.
That was the Manchester Open. Yeah, that was under his sponsorship.
Right. So that went straight to him then?
It went, well, here's the funny thing. When I first turned pro with Camkin as my sponsor, he sent myself and Pip Elson and Dave Russell out to Penina to go and have tuition and guidance by Henry Cotton. Yeah. And that was phenomenal. Fantastic experience.
Did you spend a lot of time hitting tyres?
5-6 months of that with Henry.
Yeah.
The tyre got a beating. My wedge got a beating. My wrists and my hands got stronger, but I paid for it later on in my life. Both my elbows I've had operated on, one wrist. And so I've had, injuries to give me grief and to remind me of the hit in the tyre, I'm sure. But it was a great a great training tip. But we used to run for a little while, and then we'd go and practice. But this was all about our getting ready for the tour, because tour was 100% golf.
Yeah.
There was no free time. You only had free time if you were a multimillionaire, and you were miles away from that. I remember my first check in Portugal after 6 months of practicing and playing was something like £30 for finishing in the top 30. Yeah. So it wasn't a rich man's game at that time, but it was an expensive game to pursue. Obviously, you still had the expenses to go. Those didn't stop.
It didn't take you long, to take you long. Maybe I'm kind of mischaracterizing it, but 1973 you're playing the Walker Cup, and 77 you're playing in the Ryder Cup.
Well, that's
So, and you're one of the few. There are not that many walking around now who've played for Great Britain, Ireland, and Europe in the Ryder Cup.
Yeah,
you were in the last one of the GB&I.
GB&I.
Yeah.
That was something special. Just briefly
I've interrupted your
just
flow.
briefly going back to the Manchester Open, where I won £1,000. After a year and a half of being with Camkin and the sponsorship, I rang him and I said, "Look," I said, "John," I said, "I'm going to give you some good news." I said, "It's great news after so much poor news." I said, "I'm the new Manchester Open champion." "Oh," he says, "that's marvellous news." He said, "Did you win a good prize?" I said, "Yeah, I got £1,000. I said, "It'll be winging its way to you very shortly." He says, "Well, look," he says, "I think we can do a little bonus thing here. You can keep the £1,000 as a bonus." At least that's how I remember it. Whether I did bank or not, I don't know.
What a good guy. You didn't have to do that.
No. I mean, his expenses for those first 2 years was something around about £9,500 for my total expenses for life.
Right.
Because life was my life.
Yeah.
And the prize money all went back to him. I had to borrow £1,000 to then play on tour, in Africa after my sponsorship finished. But the Walker Cup and then the Ryder Cup, it all seems to go very quickly, doesn't it?
Your golf ball is the most technologically advanced, or it's not. Your golf ball is either the most consistent, or it's not. It's the most trusted, or it's not. The fact is, it's either Titleist, the best performing golf ball in the world, or it's not. Prove it for yourself. Titleist, the #1 ball in golf. What will you play?
That Ryder Cup, I don't know what your memories are of it. Mine are that it was dud. It was a complete dud. It was Nicholas wrote his famous letter after that one saying, we have to do something about that because there was hardly any golf.
Well, he got us all together in the room
did he?
At the Clifton Arms in Lytham.
Right.
And he said, "Look, guys," he says, "I'm sorry to bring you here." He says, it's not what I want to do. He says, "But I think I have to do it." He says, "We all want to play in the Ryder Cup. We all enjoy the Ryder Cup." He says, "But because the games this week are 5-4 foursomes, 5-4 balls and 10 singles," he says, "we're only playing 3 rounds of golf." He says, "We want to come over here and play." He says, "Forget about the result. It's about the camaraderie, the social experience." He says, "For the experience of it alone," he says, "we want this thing to grow." He says, "Sevi's just started having a great year, in 1976. He says, "We want to try and get him involved. So Europe has to be part of the deal. Otherwise, it's going to die a death." So basically, those were the items.
Unanimous?
Oh, absolutely. Everybody agreed. But
even at that stage, you knew that.
But
was
the
British
players didn't want the influx from Europe. When you look at the players that came in from Europe early on, Antonio Garrido.
There was only 2 in the first one, Sevi
and Antonio.
Yeah.
And, that was lucky in a way, but then Langer came in and Pinero, Rivero came in. You had Canizares, brilliant player. I mean, all brilliant players. We started to get into it. And by the time 81 came around, and it was 79 was, where was 79?
79 was at the Greenbrier.
Greenbrier, that's right. 79 was also very dull, I believe. 81 was Walton Heath.
Yeah, well, I wrote down your singles results here for reasons best known to myself, but because they were pretty impressive. I mean, with one exception, which we'll get to in a bit.
Oh, yes.
But you very quietly beat Tom Watson in 1981 at Walton Heath.
81 was at Walton Heath, and it started to grow from there because we got a hammering at Walton Heath.
Yeah, I mean, that was some team they had, though.
Well, they reckoned it was the $20 million team. I remember the press, gauging them on money and saying
still maybe their best team ever.
Yeah, could be, could well be. I mean, the names in that team are just frightening, and when you look at Jerry Pate as being the youngest member of the team at the time, and Trevino was going to help him along. Yeah. My God, what a player! He said he could play, but he didn't have the brains to think about playing or something, didn't he, Trevino?
Trevino just told him what to do.
Yeah, exactly. I played Watson. It was that was probably the most memorable victory of my Ryder Cup career, if you like. I lost the first hole. I remember quite a bit about it, as you'd imagine.
Well, he was just about the best player in the world at the time.
I think
him and Seve.
He might. Well, he was the Masters champion, and just to stand on the first tee was something. But we played across the road at Walton Heath. We played the second hole on the old course in those days, not the par 3, the first. And he birdied the first. He holed a 35 footer at the first. And I thought, oh my God, what's going on here? My caddy said to me, he says, don't worry. He says, he won't do that all the time. I said, well, why not? I said, he's only done it all year. So he must have been pretty good. Yeah. But there wasn't coverage of golf then. You didn't see these players doing what they do and what they did, other than the Masters, the Open, US and the PGA. You didn't see them in normal events. And I went on a run. I don't know where it came from. I have no idea. I'd played with Sam one game in 4-ball. We halved with Miller and Kite. Both of us having chances at the last 2 greens to win the match outright. Sam's putt at the last lipping out. My putt at the 17th going in the hole but short, which I got scolded for by Di Reese. I remember that quite a brazen, an abrupt telling off for that. And I got dropped until the singles. And my caddy was Jim Traynor, a friend of mine from Glasgow, and he said, I can't believe this. He says, you're playing really well. He says, how can they drop you from these? I said, we just got to go with whatever's good.
Well, remember, that was the team where they didn't pick Seve.
Well,
there was a few things going on.
Seve didn't get in because he was asking for appearance money all the time. Yeah, so we were weakened accordingly. And I thought, we just got to try and play. I went on an amazing run. I had 9 birdies in the next 14 holes after Watson had birdied the first. And I beat him by 4 and 3. And I didn't have any bogeys. So I was actually 9 under par with what would be 3 holes to play. And we shook hands. I got away with a tee shot on the last hole, the 15th. I pushed it in the rough, and I managed to get a 4-iron up to the green and hold a 20-footer to birdie the match and finish it out. Alfie Files was crying into a golf bag at the side of the green, saying,
Watson's caddy.
Yeah, he was caddying for Watson, as he always did. Yeah. And he was saying, he got lucky and everything. My caddy, Jim Traynor, that's right, he got on a buggy back to the clubhouse. Over the road to the clubhouse, and he said, he says, he couldn't have been any luckier. And Tom turned to him quite quickly. He says, he played some pretty good golf out there. Just think back. He says, he kind of put him in his place.
It's a shame you weren't playing Tom Kite that day, because Kite famously beat Sandy.
He was 10
Sandy
under.
was 7 under.
Well, he was 10. He was 10 under. Was Kite that day, right, and he beat Lyle 3 and 2, and he was the match ahead of us. Right. So, it would have been a close. I'd have had to birdie 16 to be all square. That would have been a downer. The scores in those Ryder Cups didn't come out. I don't think it's ever come out that I was 9 under. Watson lost a ball on the 10th, I think it was.
I knew you'd beaten Watson, but I didn't realise you were that good.
Yeah, he was 5 under. And apart from the lost ball at the 10th, which I birdied. So I birdied and he lost the ball. So that was a kind of a win and a loss type of thing. But terrific stuff. But again, the players that played in that match were hammered. We were absolutely hammered.
Were you thinking that you could ever beat them at that point?
Oh, no. no, it didn't. It didn't look possible. It was only Palm Beach Gardens when Jacqueline took over.
Yeah.
I remember John Jacobs standing in the corridor going into the gala dinner that match at Walton Heath, and turning to Dave Marr, his opposite captain, and saying, "Take it easy on us this week, Dave, will you?" And I heard that comment, and I passed it to Sam Torrance. I said, "Can you believe this guy? He gives us no chance, our captain. He gives us no chance. What chance do we have? If the captain doesn't have the guts to say, you're going to struggle this week, at least put it to him." And I think we had a lot to prove. Some of us tried to prove it. But when we got close, when Europe got close in Palm Beach Gardens the following year.
Why were you in and out of the team?
No idea. Yeah. No idea. I can only put it down to probably marriage breakups.
Right.
I went through a bad spell. I broke up with my first wife around about 79, 80,
right,
something like that. And
difficult to play well when you're...
Well, yeah, again, off the field, off the pitch, antics actually carry on, and they harm your game, no doubt about it. Injuries hurt you, golf, and also your head is very important. It's the two parts, isn't it? It's the physical and it's the mental side. If one of them is not working properly, then it can't function
you wouldn't
properly.
Be the first or the last, did you?
No. So I can only put it down to that. The second time I had a gap from 89 to 95, that was purely injuries, my elbow injury.
Right.
And that was down to not being able to grip the club with my right hand. That's kept me out of teams then.
You played in some notable ones, though. I mean, 85 was the first European win. 87 was the first win in America.
Yeah.
And 95 was... I always think 95 gets kind of overlooked. Medina gets all the credit for the miracle stuff.
Yeah.
But 95 was as close to a miracle as you can get as well.
I think we were two behind, weren't we, going into the singles?
Level going into the singles, maybe. I don't know.
Were we?
Anyway,
okay.
But it was unlikely. I mean, nobody thought you were going to win.
I remember when... I remember quite a lot about 85, and Sam winning making the winning point and everything, and always thinking that the BBC had not shown my putt because it had, if I'd have held it,
almost you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it could have been me type of thing.
Yeah.
We did have a lot to say in the outcome, which was great. We were good partners, we were partners in those Ryder Cups, and unfortunately we couldn't get over the line in foursomes. We didn't win a foursomes match. We won four ball matches, but not foursomes. The singles, however, I did okay. 85 and 87. I
beat O'Meara in 85 and Paul in 87.
And Paul, I beat them both on the last, which, they were good games. They were close games. Dan Paul, I think, was the tournament players champion or something, World Series champion or something. Something localised to America.
He was a long hitter.
Long hitter, yeah. He hit it too many times on the 18th. I know that. Yeah, on the Muirfield Village. That
always helps.
Yeah, it did.
So what? If I was to ask you, those three are the three that stand out. At least in my mind here.
Yeah.
And
I beat.
It'd be hard to choose between them, is it?
Well, and Peter Jacobson. I beat Peter Jacobson in the last one at 95.
Again, you're one of a few here. You're one of, I think it's only 7 people have made a hole in one in the Ryder Cup. And that was a different. Have you got time to hear about that? Go for it. Yeah. People like to talk about these things. I said
to my caddy, I said, we're going on a different thing. I was so nervous playing at 95. I know we're skitting backwards and forwards, but. Mm-hmm. The 95, I was so nervous playing in the singles because I'd been beaten 8 and 7 by Tom Kite, which he's managed to miss out.
We'll get to that in a minute, yeah.
Because I'd been beaten so heavily in the last Ryder Cup I played in 89, I just didn't want to be on the record books forever. Well, fortunately for me, Woozy joined me at 8 and 7
right,
after getting a hammering.
Fred Couples, I think.
Fred Couples beat him 8 and 7. And he unfortunately had a shocking singles history for a top player. Incredible that he always seemed to get beaten right at the last minute or like heavily. And I just didn't want to go into the record books with a 10 and 8 or something that was unbeatable. And so I had to try and find a way. Being so nervous, having played so badly in the foursomes with Mark James on the first day, I was dropped again for the next 2 days and a half. Mm-hmm. And so I had to try and find some kind of a semblance of a game for the singles. And playing against Jacobson is always difficult because you think, well, he's going to shoot 70, 71, all day long. He's not going to shoot 65, but he's not going to shoot 75 either. And so I thought, well, I've got to do something. And I figured out this method. I don't know how it came about. I'd never used it before, and I never used it since. And it was called a flatline. I'd seen a film called Flatline where they hold somebody's heart to flatline, to death, basically, but they keep them going. And I said, right, I'm not going to get up. I'm not going to get down. So I'm going to go on a one flat line all the time. I said, but I've got 3 or 4 goals to go through. And I said to Stuart, I said, bear with me. I said, but I'll tell you as I'm going on how it's going to happen. Got to the first tee and I was shaking so badly. Found the fairway at the first, front of the green, 2 putted for a 4, halved it. And I came off the green and I said, Stuart, I said, that's number 1. I said, 1 ticked off. And he looked at me blank, as he should do. Yeah. Halved the second after chipping in for a half at the second. I said, 2 down, Stuart. I said, not many to go. Halved the third after getting up and down at the third hole. I said, Stuart, I said, we can relax now and play. Oh, good. He says, I'm very pleased about that. He says, are you going to speak to me now? I said, yeah, it's fine, no problem. So we kind of relaxed and got into the game.
That negatively, but yeah.
So I'd ruled out 10 and 8. I'd ruled out 9 and 8, 9 and 7, 8 and 7 being a double up. And I kind of explained it to him. And then we get round to the 10th. I lost the 10th to a birdie to Jacobson. And I stood on the 11th. And all I looked at, and I was so negative in my thoughts, all I could see at this 11th hole, after he'd teed off and hit into the bunker on the left of the flag, was the bunker and a water hazard on the right. Well, the water hazard with a 6-iron in my hand shouldn't come into play. But it was there in my head and my mind and my eyes. And the last thing I saw was water and bunker. And I'm thinking, how can I get around? And I somehow focused on breathing. And I managed to hit a shot. I didn't tee the ball up. I looked for my tee, and it was a strange reaction.
Yeah, I've watched it on television.
Yeah, it's a very strange reaction. But I looked down to pick up my tee, and of course I realised I hadn't put a tee in the ground. So, nerves were just rattling through my system. And I looked up, and I looked at the ball, and I thought, it's not in the bunker, it's not in the water, it's on the green. So that's all I wanted. Go to pick up the tee, not there. Look up again, ball bounces and rolls into the hole. And I had no idea what to do. Because of being on a flat line, not getting up and not getting down, I didn't know how to react and celebrate. Jacobson came back, shook my hand, said a few words. I can't remember what he said to me. Somebody else came over. Fluff Cowan came over because he was caddying for him, one of Tiger's caddies. Stuart eventually shook hands. I said, "My goodness!" I said, "What do I do now?" I said, "This is shaken and it shook the system and it's taken me off the flat line." He says, "You're okay." So anyway, we got onto the 12th, teed off, missed the fairway on the right, stood in the fairway. I said, "Stuart," I said, "that ball I hit on the last," I said, "we didn't use it again." "Oh yeah, it's here." So I wrote on it, "Hole in one, Ryder Cup 1995," on the 12th hole while we were waiting for Seve to play and finish. And I wrote it all on this ball. I said, "There you go." I said, "Please keep that for me." I said, that's worth keeping. And he put it in the bag. Good as gold. He put it in the bag and kept it for me. And it took me 3 holes to calm down, to realising that I was still playing. Yeah. It was all the euphoria was still there, and the crowd noise and everything and shouting and stuff. Played the 12th, half the 12th. 13th, I lost. I 3-putted. And then 14th, Jacobson let me in. It was a short par 4, and he 3-putted, and I got back to all square. And I thought, right, put in an effort for the last 4 holes. And I had the 6-iron again, and I stood on the 15th tee, and I thought, I couldn't do this again, could I? And I thought, no, just find the green this time. So anyway, I found the green, 2-putted, and wandered down the last 3 holes, and I got up and down at 16, made a great par at 17 from the front edge, but hit some quality shots. And when I came to the last hole, we had the opportunity.
I hope you're going to talk about the putt, because I can remember the putt.
Yeah, we come to the last hole, and I couldn't get to the left side of the green without running the risk of going over the green, which was dead. Yeah. Absolutely no-go area. So we had to play for the right portion of this 18th green. And I managed to find the right club, a 5-iron, and hit a perfect shot right into the right-hand side of the green and face this 60-footer across the green. Jacobson wasn't going to make better than a 4, I didn't think. And I hit this putt and I thought, why have you hit it to the right of the hole as it's going up? And I actually yipped it. I actually yipped the first putt. And I thought, how has it gone off there? Last thing I wanted to do was leave this putt above the hole and to the right. Yeah. You know, it was history. And I got behind the ball and I got over the putt and I thought, I haven't gone through my routine here. Everything's cracking up around me, and I was in such a turmoil. I thought, right, start again. So I walked back around, and it took me a good half a minute to walk around and get back into the position again. And I felt then comfortable because I got back into my routine, and I hit the putt as I would have done anyway, just a tickle right into the left half of the hole, I think it was, and hold it. And it was such a sense of euphoria then came over me. I thought, don't shout and scream. For God's sake, don't shout and scream. Just shake hands and thank you very much, because you've just come through.
Yorkshiremen don't shout and scream, do they?
You've just swum the channel here. This is amazing. You've got a point. And nothing about the result of the team, because I was second out. I was right after Seve. But this was such a great feeling. I thought, you've justified taking this plan out. Stuart, my caddy, was so tense, so traumatised. He sacked me the day after. We were going to play the Irish European Open at the K Club, and he sacked me. He says, I can't go through that kind of stress anymore. I said, oh, good, I'm glad you can't suffer it. So anyway, he sacked me, and he went to caddy for somebody else with less pressure. Yeah. That's how pressurised that situation was.
That wasn't a bad way to finish a Ryder Cup career, though, was it?
Well, yeah. I mean, a little while later, I was playing in Florida, and this little New Yorker guy came up to me and says, you're the guy that Holden won at the Ryder Cup. I said, yeah. I said, thank you very much for remembering that. Oh, he says, that was terrific, and he came out with all these superlatives and descriptions. I said, fantastic. Anyway, he walked away, and my pal Stuart said to me, he says, aren't you glad you didn't miss a putt to lose the Ryder Cup? I said, yeah. I said, it's better to have hole in one or something.
That's the most pressure, I think. You're forever remembered.
Yes.
If you screw it up.
Yeah, it is. And Langer's always remembered for one putt in the Ryder Cup. Yeah. Nobody knows. Yeah. Nobody remembers he won £1 million in the next month.
Week, that's right. Yeah. The match with Kite. I mean, I always defend anybody at your level of play who loses by a lot in an 18-hole match, because you all know standing on the first tee that you can plod along at level par quite happily. And the other guy can just go daft and be 6, 7, 8 under.
He did to me.
So you can lose heavy.
Yeah, he did to me what I did to Tom Watson. Yeah. Simple as that. I was 1 over par. He was 7 under. He beat me 8 and 7. Yeah. I could go round the Belfry. If I could go over and play the Belfry now and be 1 over par after 11, I'd be delighted nowadays. Yeah. I wasn't delighted back then, but there was one incident that took it. It was walking off the first green. There was all the crowd getting up. He'd hold a putt across the green, as he did all day that day. And he won the first hole, and the crowd were all geeing me up, and I was thinking, no, be quiet. I don't want noise. I need quiet. And I was reacting badly straight away. But the second green was where it all happened, because I putted up from a poor second shot, I must say. It was only a short iron in, and I put it up from about 30 feet, and he had a birdie putt again from not far away, and he conceded my putt because it was close to the hole, and I'd kind of semi-looked away, but he'd thrown the ball to me, tossing the ball back, here it go, and it hit me on the head. Right. And I'm not kidding, it shook me up there, and if I could have been mindful of being a professional footballer and fallen to the ground and writhed in agony for 3 minutes and called a referee.
Yeah, he put him off, yeah.
We might have got a half a point, which would have won us the Ryder Cup.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't have that thought in my mind. He reminded me of it several years later when I was working for Sky, and he felt guilty about it.
Right.
He says, I'm sure that had something to do with it. I said, you're absolutely right, Tom. I said, but we can't do anything about it now. But he was, he's done a lot of damage to a lot of players, Tom Kite, in singles matches.
What do you mean?
In singles matches. Well, he beat Sandy Lyle. Sandy Lyle was, like we said, at 6 or 7 under when he lost at Walton Heath, and he beat all sorts of players. Terrific player. He won 1 major, and that's really a crazy amount for him because he was one of the best. Always very gentlemanly about it. He never, gave it to anybody in any nasty way.
Terrible putting yips at the end of his senior career.
Yeah, he did. He won plenty of events in his senior career too. A terrific player. But one that sticks in your mind, and one that I'm glad that I've got a partner there, Ian Woosnam, who lost 8 and 7, as we say, to couples. So.
The 95, just in passing, were you aware of what Seve was doing up ahead?
Yes.
Did you pay any attention?
Oh yeah, we watched it all the time. I asked the marshal after 7 holes, how was Seve doing? He says he's all square. I said, really? I said, he's all square. I said, that's fantastic. I said, I better get my finger out here. I said, we could do some damage here and get some points on the board. And of course, the 12th hole, where I'm standing writing on my golf ball, he's having a big argument with Lehman on the 12th green about holding the putt, not holding the putt, marking the ball, trying his best to get a Seve moment.
Well, he was dead right on that. I mean, Lehman just didn't know the rule. Yeah, Seve was quite entitled to ask him to leave.
But I think there was talk of him trying to claim the hole, which unfortunately was the go-to. But I think
Bernard Gallagher tells a story about the standing on the 10th fairway that day, and he goes up to Seve. Seve was 1 down. He goes, "How are you doing, Seve?" "Oh, I'm 1 down," and he's all smiles. And Bernard says, "Well, why are you so happy?" He says, "I should be 9 down."
Yeah. I watched him play the 7th, and he was all over the place. And he made a half. He got a half, and it was inspirational to start, to say the least. I wasn't feeling inspirational at all. I was trying to feel nothing, as I said, but he was an inspiration to everybody because he said he knew that we could do it, and we could do it. Of course, when Gallagher made his speech at the end, he pointed to Seve. It looked like he was pointing to either Faldo or myself on the line, but he was pointing to Seve as the next captain for 97, which was terrific.
You mentioned in passing their majors very briefly. I've argued this a few times in print, and I've maybe said this to you before, but I think that you were part of the group, the Europeans, who were sort of half a step down from Faldo, Woosnam, Langer, Lyle, those guys. And I've got here that this is ridiculous when you think of what level of player you were. You played in 1 Masters, 1 US Open, and 2 PGAs. Yeah. Now, you're part of that group. I also have you... 25 Opens? Yeah, 23 Opens. 23 Opens, is it? You, Mark James, Sam Torrance, Ken Brown, that kind of group. I mean, you got shafted, basically. You never got to play. Whereas if you'd come along a generation later, you're not going to tell me that the likes of Justin Rose and Paul Casey and those guys were any better players than you. And they've, certainly Rose popped up in 1-1. My argument is always that you were every bit as good as the likes of Bob Tway, Larry Mize, Jeff Sluman, all of whom won a major championship. Had you guys been playing in all 4 every year, inevitably one of you would have popped up and won one. That's just what happens in golf. Argue with me if you like, or difficult. Put me right. I feel sorry for you. I think you were done by the time that you were at your peak. I remember writing to the American sponsors for events just to go and play in, say, the Los Angeles Open, AT&T, Florida tournaments. I managed to get some replies. I got invited to
3 Florida events on the trot. I actually roomed with Brian Barnes and drove Brian Barnes round because he wasn't fit to drive anywhere in those days. But he made great company. He was part of my learning. He was
wonderful,
curve.
Wasn't he? Yeah.
Oh, amazing! Until he started eating green pickles, and
really?
drinking beer. Yeah, it wasn't a good sight. But
anyway, my point was that to underline it was that the guys that you were part that group, you would all have been in the top 50 in the world.
Yeah.
You would all have been in all the majors.
But it was difficult for us. The point I was trying to make by these Florida events, it was difficult to get into those events, let alone majors. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like you say, I played in 1 US Open. I was actually invited I qualified to play in the US Open once, as far as I could tell. Mm. And my son William was being born in 1996. I didn't play because he was near to coming into the world, but and I was playing poorly at the time, so it helped. It helped in a way to make that decision in 96. But I was playing great in 95, so go figure that one out. The way that they did it, I don't know how they did it, but I finished 3rd in the order of merit twice. I think in 84 and 86.
And got no benefit from it.
Did not get an invite. Yeah. I didn't get an invite to the Masters.
Does it piss you off as much as it pisses me off?
Of course. In a way, when I look back, I think I played in 87, the Masters, when Larry Mize won. Yeah. But it was because of 86, my play in 86. Well, I won the PGA in 84, didn't get an invite to the Masters in 85 or 86. No, I don't know what we had to do, to be honest. It was unwritten rules and qualification, world rankings. Yeah. They existed at some time.
My argument, again, it goes beyond that. I mean, it compromises the list of major champions. Until fairly recently, the bias towards Americans, for obvious reasons, there was 3 of them in America. I mean, it almost makes the list, it undermines it.
Yeah, I think the majors have... It's good that they've held their own. I don't think it's good that the majors have all stayed in America. Certainly the PGA seems to have...
Well, you wouldn't have it now. You wouldn't have 3 in one country if you started over.
You wouldn't think so. You'd have one in Asia, Australasia, I should say. Maybe one in South Africa, maybe one in the USA, and one in Europe. And I think it would travel around Europe. It should travel around Europe. But the difficulty was getting your game together for a major championship, for the Open Championship, knowing it's your only hit in the year. It didn't make sense because you usually put all your effort into it.
I'm glad you say that, right, Howard, because given how good a player you were, your record in the Open's rubbish.
Oh, it's terrible.
1 top 10.
Well, eighth at Sandwich when Bill Rogers won, and on that last day I had 14 injections in my side because I'd pulled a muscle on the first day, and I was injured. I was playing well, but I was injured. I was driven to Canterbury Hospital on the first day after I played because this muscle pull from my rib cage. I had several injections by the doctors at the RNA. They were okay. They were fine with it. But the last day I started to go really well, and the adrenaline in my system pushed out the anesthetic or whatever it was, and I needed injections. This guy started stabbing me in the side with a needle. It was horrific. Okay. Tom Watson was putting on the green at the 13th behind, and I'm standing behind a sand dune on the 14th having my side injected. No wonder I played well because I couldn't be asked about the game. I was just thinking about getting in and finishing. But I played well at Troon in 77. I played well at Turnberry in 1977. But 2 players in the world were different class then.
Tournament,
They were playing a different game altogether. I played well at Troon in 89, I think it was. But never really. I didn't feel that I featured in any Open Championship at all. To finish 8th, I came up from behind a little bit, but there was never a time when I was leading or close to the lead on any of these Open Championships. In fact, I got closer to the leaderboard at the Masters after 2 rounds, or during the second round, before the nosebleed got me on the 17th, I think it was.
Now, there's a couple of things I want to get into before we finish here. The commentary side of things. How did you get into that? And what was your feeling about what were you trying to bring to commentary? I always ask that question.
Oh, that's good. The commentary side, I went to the 87 Ryder Cup at Muirfield Village. I was invited in to talk with Harry Carpenter during the lulls in play. And I was quite happy to do that on the singles day, the last day. I'd played early. I'd won my match against Dan Paul, and they just invited me to go and sit in the studio. And I was caught on camera smoking at that time. Right. I was a smoker in those days. And Harry was so easy to work with. He was a delight. I got a letter back from Bill Cotton. Thank you very much, blah, blah, blah. I went to 87. So that I would have been at the Masters. Now, I was at the Masters in 87 as well. So I'd been at the Masters and I'd been on the balcony with Steve Ryder, passing comments over the playoff and, a couple of things then. I got invited back at the Ryder Cup, and then Bill Cotton wrote me a letter, real lovely letter. I wish I'd have kept it. He said, anytime you'd like to come and work again for us, we'd be delighted. Maybe when your career's finished, that type of thing, please get in touch. Anyway, I didn't put a lot of I suppose importance in this until later on. And then got Ian Murray invited me to go along to the Cannes Open, Cannes Mougins, and worked alongside him for Eurosport. He was doing 7-8 hours of commentary on his own in a little box down near the practice ground.
Remember him telling me about that.
It's funny. And he said, would you like to come and do a couple of hours? Yeah, I'd love to come and sit alongside. So we had a chat like we are now, and we talked about the golf. And he says, maybe you'd like to come and do some more of that. I said, yeah, I'd love to if I get the chance. And the BBC then got in touch and asked me to work on a couple of tournaments for them. And the BBC were great. John Shrewsbury and Alistair Scott. Yeah. Alistair, who starter at the European Tour events. And they were the producer and director, and the 2 wonderful, wonderful characters, great in the TV world. And I remember going out on the first day with the BBC at the ladies' tournament at Woburn. And they said, will you go out and follow Laura Davis or Maria Hjort, I think it was. He says, and just give us an insight in what they're doing. And so I did, and I went to the first few holes, and nothing, absolutely nothing on my ears. I've got my headphones on and microphone ready and the backpack, and the guy alongside me with all the equipment and a big aerial and over and under these ropes. It was quite a performance. And he just handed me the mic when it was my turn. When it never came to me at all. He said, so I got a call over my headphones. He said, Howard, where are you? Oh, I said, I'm with Maria Hjort and Laura Davis. Oh, right. Have you got anything to say? I said, well, the players are just walking up to the 4th green. Oh, right. Let's go to Howard now. So it came to me. So anyway, a couple of holes later, they said, Howard, whereabouts are you? I said, I'm at the 6 with Maria Hjort and Laura Davis. And it's, oh, right. Have you anything to say? I said, well, yeah, they're just about to chip onto the short hole. Great. Oh, right. Let's go to Howard. So came to me again. So after a couple of holes, they said again, same thing. I don't know whether it was John or Alistair. It said, Howard, whereabouts are you? I said, look, I'm with the Hjort group. I said, I'm going to stay with them until they finish.
Stop asking.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Have you anything to say? I said, look, I've always got something to say. Just anytime you like. I said, no problem. I said, no problem at all. And so it became quite funny, and we all had a laugh about it afterwards, and they were wonderful to work alongside. But they said, oh, look, we'd like you to come and do a few more, blah, blah, blah. He said this, that, and the other. And so I went and worked for the BBC a little bit. I then got invited to work for Sky for a couple of events. And I got the usual welcome from some people.
Always on the course, you were?
Always on the course, yeah. Always loved being on the course by the players, kind of not calling shots, but giving information.
So what do you reckon is the role of that? What was your job description, if you like?
Colour,
right?
Basically.
Yeah. Try and say what they're thinking, that kind of thing.
No, I never tried to guess, or predictions were always I tried to not predict.
Right.
I never tried to predict. I heard other attempts at predictions totally go wrong. So I never tried to predict. All I tried to do was give accuracy, bit of breeze, bit of distance, how long it's playing, what kind of lie the ball was in, trying different things all the time. I tried to add something that you couldn't see on the screen.
Yeah.
I got no direction, got no help from anybody. I got congratulations on certain things. I got told off for other things. You just part of way of life and learning. And I decided that was my area. I could do with it.
Was it that or senior golf? Was you had a choice to make?
Yeah, I didn't. That's a separate thing altogether. But I tried to play senior golf after being out of the game for 8 years, and it wouldn't happen. Couldn't happen.
Yeah.
Too many injuries. Out of the game too long. I got neck problems, and I didn't like the way the seniors tour was set up anyway. There were too many bad things happening on that senior tour, which really...
There was always a lot of moaning and groaning on that tour, I remember.
Oh yeah, I was told on the senior tour that they had a box full of Advil on the first tee. Well, I never saw that. I never saw that. But no, I knew it wasn't for me after I played a couple of events, and it just wasn't for me. I'd spent too long out of the game. But the Sky thing, I was with Sky for 18 years before the box ticking department decided I was too old, or it wasn't good enough, or whatever. Or they couldn't find any work for me. I missed it for quite a while. It took a long time to get it out of my system. And I wasn't angry. I was just disappointed, really, because there was when I left, there was 70-something tournaments on offer for viewers. Mm-hmm. And Sky told me that they couldn't find me any work. Well, if they couldn't find me any work for 6 or 7, 8 weeks or a year, I'm amazed really by that. But listen, it's all in the past now, and I'm glad I retired. There was I had a few little health issues, but with traveling always gave me a hard time.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
Flying and getting trains from here, to get to Heathrow was only by train.
Yeah.
It was a pain, real pain to go to the States, but I enjoyed it. My first event out in the States, I get asked to go with Sky for the TPC, which is coming up shortly.
Another hole-in-one coming up.
And amazingly, David Tippett, who was my boss at the time, said to Roger Stevenson at PGA Tour Productions, "Look, we've got Howard Clark coming on to the team next week, or in a few weeks' time." He said, "We'd like to get him to hit do a feature of 16, 17, and 18, and hit a shot on 17, the par 3. Oh no, never going to happen. Can't do it. End of story. Email finished, gone." So he tried again, and and there were several emails, went backwards and forwards, and then eventually Roger Stevenson said, look, he says, if you want to get Howard there before everybody else gets there and hit a shot, what can I do about it? Who knows? Yeah. He says, just get on with it and don't tell everybody about it. Just do it, and we'll sort it out afterwards. So I went, and we went out at 7:00 in the morning. I'd borrowed 3 clubs from Darren Clark's caddy, Billy Foster. Yeah. I'd got 3 golf balls because I wasn't so confident of hitting the green with any of them, but certainly I thought might get one on the green. Asked Billy the yardage, got the club, and he said, probably an 8-iron for you. And we went out that morning, 7:00, and I'd got the clubs and balls the night before. They weren't there at that time. There was nobody there. Hit a few balls on the range, stand up, and this is my first event in the States for Sky. What an introduction. Cracky, if you wanted anything to happen that was like this. And, the cameraman, Brian Blodgett, God bless him, he's since departed. he said, look, this is the first shot. He says, I just hit a ball. He says, doesn't matter where it goes. He says, it can finish on the green, but I'm not getting that. He says, I'm getting a colour shot, this, that, and the other of your swing. So I hit that shot and it went on the green. I said, oh, shame you missed that one. I said, it's gone on the green, Brian. Oh, he says, that's good. He says, second one's always the one. He says, for me, he says, I'll get that from behind. He says, and we'll follow it all the way in the air. And he says, dropping into the water. He says, perfect. So I said, thanks for the confidence booster. Yeah. So I got up and I'm just about to grip the shot and grip the club and hit the shot. And I said, anybody got a towel? I said, my hands are a bit they're perspiring. Didn't have a glove. Right. Anyway, I hit the shot, went in the hole. And I fell about, laughter and everything. Did he get that? He says, "Oh, absolutely." He says, "I think you'll be in. You'll like that." So we got a shot of the green. The green when we walked up there to pick the ball out of the hole was full of worm casts. Right. It's before the greenkeepers had got on to put it in pristine condition. And the flag was only 6 foot on the green. It was an illegal, practice day position. So one that they'll never play. But what a thrill. Going back to the compound, all of us were beaming smiles on our faces. And the only person that didn't actually believe it had happened was Butch Harmon. He said, it must have been camera trickery. Yeah. I said, was the swing all right, Butch? He says, it must have been. You holed in one, didn't you? I said, well, yeah, I did. So it was the thrill of a lifetime. But poor old Roger Stevenson, he says, we'll have hundreds, if not thousands of requests now from all the Japanese, Chinese companies to come and hit a shot on the 17th. Yeah. Thanks, David, he said. Yeah.
Last question, Howard. I'm conscious we've been talking long. How much attention do you pay now, sitting here in your lounge, to the world of golf? There's a lot going on at the moment, obviously. I dip in now and again.
I dip in when I want to, really, as much as anything. I still, I still pay for Sky TV and watch the Sky Golf every now and again, but I seem to limit it now because it's been fractured with the LIV influx and the separation of money and players to money and everything that's gone on. Because it's fractured, I don't think there's anything really worth watching other than the majors. And the majors are difficult to watch anyway because you don't always see the top players that you want to see at any one time. I find it a hard watch. The European Tour has been hurt badly. I think the PGA Tour has been hurt badly too.
Yeah, everything's diminished right now.
Yeah, everything seems to be weakened, watered down. I wish they could all sort it out and get it all sorted out together. I see that the world ranking points are now being forgotten about.
I think you should just get rid of them. There's no point to them. I've never thought there was much point to them.
Well,
because the majors can fill the fields up whatever way they want, and you can't. If you're Howard Clark playing in Europe and Joe Blow is playing in America, I mean, how can you possibly compare the two?
Yeah, that's very true.
It doesn't work for me.
So you pick from the order of merits then?
You have the top 5 from Asian Tour get in the Open, and the Open can go back to final qualifying again. I miss that.
That's very true.
I think the Open doesn't live up to its name in many ways.
There must be some way, but really you cannot judge. Then you look at LIV, and how can you possibly judge LIV as being creditable when they only play 54 holes, 14 events a year? They're basically exhibition matches.
Their biggest problem is that if you're playing in a LIV event, you're compromised possibly if you've got a 30-foot putt on the last green to win as an individual, but if you lag it up and 2-putt the team wins, you're completely. What do you do? You can't have that in real competition.
No. There has to be change. LIV has to conform to some kind of degree with the rest of the world, and there has to be. You can't have separate.
There's got to be compromises
events.
On all sides here.
An exhibition tour cannot count for the same things. So, do you pick the top 5 players from LIV? So, in that way, you'd say Taylor Gooch or who's the last kid that won out there?
Neiman is.
Neiman.
He's done well outside LIV as well, of course.
Yeah, but
I mean, he's one of the top 15 players in the world.
Yeah. Is he really? Yeah. Is he really? He's I don't think I'd recognise him if he
No,
stood
well, maybe
up.
not, but
That's the problem.
He'd be certainly top 20, probably top 15.
Yeah, it's a hard watch at the moment. It's difficult to sit down and watch for long. I like to watch certain players. I miss Tiger on tour. I watched Tiger for probably best part of goodness knows how many years, from 2000 right through 16 years. I probably watched Tiger close, right up close, and got on very good speaking terms with him and his caddy. Really good rapport with the pair of them, and you got Ryder Cups and everything. And yeah, I would say that he was the measure for a long, long time. Rory came along. I watched Rory and followed Rory in his first US Open win. Congressional. Yeah. Congressional rings a bell, and those things I remember very well, and I remember following him in his last major win at Valhalla, going into virtual darkness. Yeah. Well, it was dark, no doubt about it. It's amazing how they got some light from those pictures. He was lucky in a way. His ball stayed out of the hazard because he was hitting into the darkness. I enjoyed the commentary as much as I did playing at times. There wasn't as much pressure in certain ways, but there was more pressure in other ways, not to speak at the wrong time or not to speak over somebody else that was talking at the time. You have some news at one moment and it's gone. That's the thing about on-course commentary. You don't need to tell it, because you've got pictures that can tell it.
Tell us what we've just seen.
Yeah, exactly. If that's the case. Stating the obvious. That was one of Henry Cotton's things. He used to fine us for one little thing about Henry Cotton. He used to fine us for stating, as he put it, stating the bleeding obvious. And he'd fine us 5 escudos for saying, "Oh, that's a nice looking, that's a good shot," or something like that. Something obvious, stating the bleeding obvious. He was a good, funny guy at times. But no, it's a difficult watch at the moment, and I just hope that they can get back together and put all the players that are rightfully in their places. You can't have Phil Mickelson or Dustin Johnson out of the order of merits and world rankings. You can't. That's not possible. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Anyway, on that happy note, Howard, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and
thank you.
Thanks again.
Enjoyed it.
Howard Clark there, proof, if it was needed, that it's not only the biggest names in the game that have interesting stories to tell. Well, I hope you've made the effort to follow the pod so you get our new episodes delivered automatically, because on our next, we catch up with one of Australia's most beloved golfers.
When it's your National Open, that's what makes it special. I don't think I would feel quite the same if I won the Japan Open. I mean, I would think that's fantastic, but I'm not Japanese.
That's 1997 Australian Open winner Jane Crafter, next time on The Thing About Golf.